Now, tomorrow we are going to properly go through the mythic raid testing which ended yesterday. However, for today we're going to take a pit stop, a break towards the currently most degenerate and broken of the DPS specs that have been tested yesterday, because while there have been some, decent and well-performing specs, some of these are performing well by themselves, others are, in a bit of an unhealthy state, and the current prize, the current #1 winner definitely goes to Balanced Druid. So the #1 winner, the Balanced Druid, goes in today's video because of what we are seeing in these clips, where the Balanced Druid is dishing out some 55 to 60 million damage crits with their Star Surges inside of your Celestial alignment. This has caused some massive, definitely the largest burst of damage we have seen in single target this expansion, for sure, maybe even previous expansions, but the way Blizzard has designed this tier set for Balanced Druid for Keeper of the Grove is definitely lending itself for quite the unhealthy playstyle. Who could have guessed this? If I actually bothered to actually go and pick this back up, we mentioned this the first time we looked at and read through the tier sets being released and revealed, we said that this could have been abused, could have been difficult to balance because of the way it works. The idea that you summon a Dryad as soon as you enter your Celestial alignment for 10 seconds, and then at the end of the duration of this Dryad, so at the end of the 10 seconds, you take 5% of the damage you have done, and then you are going to blow it up on one target, and even in AoE splash it around on multiple targets. Now this has, of course, warped the design, the choices of the Druids because of how powerful it is. For example, you no longer take Force of Nature to have a reduced cooldown, instead you want your Force of Nature to give you more astral power. You no longer take, for example, talents in the middle like Umbral Inspiration, or trying to take more consistent damage talents like, for example, your Mushrooms. Instead, you do take Fury of the Loon with the extra damage of Fury of the Loon. Why? Because now you want to concentrate as much damage as you can in this 10-second window to store as much damage as you can to then have this big blow up at the end. So obviously having a reduced cooldown of your Force of Nature does nothing for this burst of damage. Meanwhile, your Force of Nature flooding you with astral power so you can dump more Star Surges on the target does a lot. Same goes for the consistent damage of your Mushrooms not doing too much in a burst window, whereas of course your Fury of the Loon helping you much more in a burst window. Then of course you have your potion, and then of course an unused trinket. This one is going to be the strongest of the unused trinkets in 11.2 in Season 3. Araz's Ritual Forge, a 2-minute cooldown, which gives you an insane amount of intellect, of primary stat, 45,000 primary stat at max myth item level. Take in mind that right now your character has 114,000 intellect at 710 item level, so gaining 45,000 is like 40% more intellect, decaying over 30 seconds, but it's fine. What you care most about is the first 10 seconds of this burst window while the Dryad is active, so you can store the damage inside of these 10 windows to then blow them up with your Star Surges. Now, as you've seen from these clips, the resulting in the testing is just about the same. What we have seen in the PTR in terms of damage done, this is pretty much what you can expect from the Druids testing these bosses. Plexus Sentinel, which was killed in testing in this fight. You can see the Druid doing pretty much nothing, and then inside of Celestial alignment is where the damage of your Star Surge is coming from. In this case, the Druid is doing a double up because you have, in case you didn't know, you have 2 charges of your Celestial alignment. You can benefit from this expiring Dryad buff back to back. In this case, for example, UCA, and then what is that, 13 seconds later UCA again. So UCA, 10 seconds later, when this expires, your next 2 star surges are empowered, so you can do your big blow up damage, and then you can CA again and cast them while they are empowered again, back to back. I believe you could before, I think you still can actually double up and cheese this empowered star surges from your Dryad, for the very simple fact that when you enter CA, of course, you have other buffs, like for example, balance of all things. So if you CA, gain the 10-second buff of the Dryad, the Dryad expires, now the Dryad empowers your next 2 star surges to do mega damage, well, you can enter CA again to get, for example, balance of all things to give you 20% more crit, to try to make those 2 empowered star surges do even more damage, for example. It is obviously quite the unhealthy playstyle, because of course once you move outside of this window, obviously the Druid is playing normally, right? It's playing just like he normally would, and of course the damage outside of this window of the Druid, playing with this style, not this one, playing with this style, goes near the tanks, right? It goes near the tanks, and then once you go back inside of this window for the Druid, like for example the pool with Bloodlust and whatever, you have the Druid more or less doing this kind of damage. So it's a very polarizing kind of build, which however I'm afraid will be practically unbalanceable in the raid, because as you might already know, damage burst windows are very powerful in a raid setting. We can stay on bosses you already know. We don't have to go into the new raid. We can just stay in Liberation of Undermine. Think about, for example, phases where you want to burst down, for example, adds on one-armed bandit when they spawn, or maybe the execute phase of Magzi or other prio targets you want to burst down in a raid, or a difficult phase you want to get out of in a raid because it's harder than the others. This kind of burst damage is just much more valuable than the standard consistent damage another DPS could be bringing, because of course, right, imagine for example a situation where instead of having this kind of damage, you had uneven damage across the entire fight. What special thing could this even damage give you in a particular phase compared to another one? Right? Nothing. It's just even consistent damage. It doesn't give you anything extra. Whereas if you have this kind of damage profile, it could be way too easily abusable, right? And you can see the damage compared to the Balance Druid is above in a few other phases, but compared to the power you could gain from these windows from the Balance Druid, it would lead to a bit too much abuse. Now, to be fair, at the moment this is doubly bugged in the sense that this isn't even as powerful as it should be, because as you can see here, there is no damage from your Dryad. The Dryad isn't actually working. Yes, if we go back in game and we actually do some damaging in here, you will see the Dryad actually come out and actually work. She will pop out, actually act like she's doing something, like she's being useful, right? She's casting, right? The Dryad is casting. Supposedly, these are supposed to be star surges. And once we go at the end of this damage window and we check the damage, where is the Dryad? Maybe it's hidden under here? No, it's not. There is no Dryad. So she's basically role-playing, casting star surges when they actually don't do any damage. So technically your damage would be even higher than this, but after the latest hotfix, which changed a few things, the Dryad stopped working, but as a result, you still have this insane damage burst inside of your star surge. So don't exactly know how this will be fixed for a Balanced Druid. After all, the way it works is just too abusable. Maybe they will spread the damage, maybe they will not tie this to celestial alignment, they will reduce the damage of CA, because of course The burst window of Balanced Druid was already pretty good, and now you have an entire tier set centered around making their burst damage even stronger. And that's it. That's all the tier set does. That's the problem. If you look at the tier set of Druid, it just reads completely around your cooldown. So Celestial Alignment calls upon the Dryad for 10 seconds, which does more damage inside of CA, and then when the Dryad fades 10 seconds after, which is still inside of CA because CA lasts for 16 seconds, your next 2 star surges damage for an additional amount. So it's just extra damage exclusively inside of your burst window. And this is a major problem because these tier sets, as we have seen already, we mentioned this already, they seem to be quite a lot stronger than Season 2 and even Season 1's tier sets. And they seem to be in the realm of the 15 to 20% more damage given to any given spec. So when you give a 15 to 20% damage increase to a spec, but you keep it entirely in the 16 seconds of your Celestial Alignment cooldown, that 15 to 20% damage increase of other specs, which is spread throughout an entire 7-minute fight, has to be crammed inside a 16-second window of a major cooldown, which makes the major cooldown be completely out of control for Balanced Druid. So not quite sure how Blizzard will fix this problem. The best one would be to just get rid of a few of these buffs inside of your CA and just spread them throughout your toolkit across the fight. Just increase the flat damage of your Wrath, or the flat damage of your Starfire, or the flat damage of your Dots, whatever, something that works throughout the fight, and then not make the burst of damage inside of your CD nearly as big. Because as we have seen already from the results of these last couple of days of testing, this is completely unsustainable. It's by far the biggest meme of a spec on the PTR right now, next to another one. But the other one is not a DPS spec, so we're not gonna mention it for today. But in terms of damage, this one is clearly the weirdest one right now. So we will see how will Blizzard go at dealing with this, because it's gonna be tricky since the entire tier set is centered around buffing your burst, buffing your cooldown. So nerfing it might nerf it too much, because Balanced Druid outside, as we mentioned, outside of this burst window is doing nearly tank damage. So you can't just nerf this burst window tier set only, because then Druid would be far too weak. You have to make an exchange, an equivalent exchange, get rid of some of the power inside of this burst window from this tier set, and then spread it across your damage profile for the entire fight. That is what should be done in the future of the PTR, in the next few weeks before the release of Season 3. So we will see how Blizzard will go at it, changing this tier set, because of course 100% this will be changed, maybe even before this video goes live, or not, since it's Saturday as usual. Weekend Blizzard devs are gonna be asleep, but we will see maybe Monday, Tuesday, before the next reset, what kind of changes there will be, and maybe one will be already about this tier set. But for today, on this Saturday, we're gonna leave this here with a question mark for the future on how this will get changed. So now we are going to leave each other. We're starting the goodbyes as usual by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who's been supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, yeah, I like this church profound and holy rays of light coming down from behind. They elevate my figure.